As your lawyer, I'm advising you to keep doing this shit. Nothing polarizes people against the far right quite as much as seeing Nazis marching down Main Street. Madison, Wisconsin. Wisconsin has been racking up some serious like social democrat dubs lately too. So this is a pretty funny contrast. But listen to me, Wisconsinite man of Wisconsin. All right, choose your path. Will you have sensible governance led by a Democratic majority in your state house and Senate, or will you have the LARPy Nazis in the gay uniforms? You know. Let me see if I can get better video of this. I thought this video would be longer. Here we go. CBS Chicago. Chicago? The red is very ugly. Yeah, I agree. This feels very, very LARPy to me because like having everyone wear a uniform is one thing, but like the brown shirts didn't all literally just dress up in the colors of the flag they represented, you know? It's just like, hey, everyone, we need to wear red and black because that's the flag color, except they don't even have red in their Nazi swastika flags. It's just a swastika. So why are you wearing red? Just dumb. Just wear all black. The red looks stupid.
New at 10, Wisconsin's governor is calling a march by neo-Nazis through downtown Madison truly revolting. Nearly 24 members of the group walked along State Street towards the Wisconsin state capitol before ending up at James Madison Park. Police monitored the march, saying a Facebook post they don't, quote, support hateful rhetoric, but that the department has an obligation to protect First Amendment rights. The Midwest chapter of the Anti-Defamation League urged communities to do...
By the way, I just want to say, I know a lot of people have like a snap reaction to stuff like this, but I think it's great to allow them to march around, and I'm not joking. We're not at a historical moment where people like this actually pose much of a direct threat. We're not in the brown shirt era at the moment, meaning that doing shit like this basically just makes them look really bad and reminds people that this is like a real thing they have to be worried about. And what's more, if they had a clash with police, that would be exactly what they want. Like they would love the attention of a bunch of police officers like clashing with them and, you know, the blah blah blah, like, oh yeah, we're being persecuted for our blah blah. Yeah, they would love that. So just having them march around like a bunch of dweebs, so everyone gets like this nice 50-50 reminder that A, this is a thing to be worried about, and B, like their safety isn't being threatened right now. Yeah. I don't know. How many are informants? Statistically speaking, about half of them.
Protect First Amendment rights. The Midwest chapter of the Anti-Defamation League urged communities to do more to stop anti-Semitism.
The Nazis were also mocked in the 20s. Yeah, okay. I'm not saying don't take Nazis seriously. I think anyone who's watched this channel for any length of time would know that I'm not saying don't take them seriously. What I'm saying is that I know that we often celebrate the aesthetic of like Antifa battling Nazis on the streets, but I don't know, man. I've been doing this for 5 years, and after pretty extensive like looking into both contemporary and historical examples of this happening, I think it almost always benefits them to do the fighting because it gives them the attention that they want. It projects their image. It gives them the opportunity to make public speeches addressing such and such. Usually, like, mocking them works when they're in a position where mockery is the only consequence of what they do. If they start getting strong enough that mockery is no longer sufficient in and of itself, mockery is no longer the appropriate response. In this instance, though, like battling them on the street gives them exactly what they want. Just mocking them is great, you know? Look, even Nazis know this is bad optics because Nazis online will instantly call people like this feds the moment shit like this drops. Like, every far-right person online is racing to their keyboards right now, or yesterday, I guess, to say, oh, these guys are feds, fed, not real, not us, feds, nice meme, you know, every single time. So I think we should take that into account and acknowledge that if they're embarrassed of this, it's like Charlottesville, right? Like, Charlottesville made them look really, really bad. And a lot of that was just because they, you know, actually showed up. I love it when they show up. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic when they show up because it usually makes them look really bad. Why do they have a pirate Nazi flag? I will acknowledge, in addition to every other criticism that I am making, that their flag is really ugly. It's literally just a swastika. At what point does actually fighting them become effective? Like, how much power would we need before those optics turn in their favor? Okay, I didn't want to turn this... I've had this conversation before. It's very, very complicated, and people never like what I have to say. Okay, Based on what I understand, even back during the days of the brown shirts, directly confronting them almost always served their interests. And that's usually because groups like this can make appeals to far right who have a presence in media, who have an incentive to lionize the behavior of the Nazis in opposition to whatever force they confronted. Whereas when leftists go out there and do the same thing, we don't usually have that privilege. Like, far right media will defend, like Charlottesville. Trump defended Charlottesville, but Democrats rarely go out there and start like hardcore propaganda posting over the victories of Antifa or whatever. I don't know, did punching Richard Spencer work that well for me? It didn't do anything. That's what I'm saying. The gif of Richard Spencer being punched is satisfying for you, and that's good. It should be satisfying. But that, like, don't mistake what is cathartic for what is actually good politics. There are literally historical examples of these big confrontations between brown shirts and like opposing like social democrats or leftists or whatever, and examples of this happening in America as well, like before World War II, before our involvement. And what I found is usually it doesn't actually work that well for us. And a big part of that is because fascists are the group that get off on being militaristic, violent, radicalizing people based on the perception of committing violence, and getting people in media to lionize their violence. We don't. That's their thing. We don't do that. Our allies in media aren't as aligned towards those interests, which usually means the most that we get out of conflicts like that is the average person looks at it as two groups of extremists fighting one another. They see Nazis and they see Antifa and they think, oh, wow, look at those far right and left lunatics duke it out. In my opinion, I think the best possible outcome when shit like this happens is just for everyone to look at them and think, wow, they're still around. They look ridiculous. That's bad. And then, like, be negatively polarized accordingly. I think that's way more effective. Keep in mind, the reason they do shit like this is to stir up controversy and conflict. They want videos of some like soy-faced, colored hair Antifa dude showing up, like walking out of a Starbucks and going like, dude, that's a Nazi swastika. You can't do that, dude. And then recording videos. They like have Andy Ngo right there on the side with a video camera, like ready to take videos of confrontation so that they can have 1,000 far-right YouTube channels, and politicians go like, we need to deal with the terror of soy boy Antifas fighting people on the street. Like, they want that. They're fully prepped to do this. They have a whole apparatus of doing this, you know? Like, that's the whole point of them doing this, you know? Them just walking around and not doing anything, then going back home, it usually makes them look pretty dumb. And it usually leads to a bunch of people on the far right denouncing them and calling them feds, which is an indication that they're embarrassed of their behavior. And that's good for us because the embarrassment makes them look less cool. And the less cool they look, the less effectively they can galvanize potential conflict in favor of recruiting new people. And it reminds normies that Nazis are a real threat that need to be taken seriously, even if right now that threat is only at the level of them doing a gay march through downtown. Does everyone understand what I've said? The best case scenario, if these guys really do start getting rowdy, by the way, is not us fighting them. Because, again, that for normies, that's just like two extremist groups fighting each other. But rather them confronting police. Historically, when these guys confront police, it always makes us look good. Because while police do have strong sympathies to the far right, generally speaking, that's not so much the case that they'll, like, usually not, you know, try to arrest them if they get rowdy. Even in cases like Charlottesville or whatever else, like the police may have sympathies to the far right, but they're not literally like 100% of the time completely on board. So as a consequence of that, when the police and these guys end up fighting, which, hey, remember when that happened at the Cenotaph in the UK just a couple days ago? Remember? Seriously, look up examples of far-right protesters fighting with police. They make us look fantastic because the only people who really support the police are right-leaning normies and the right, which means when the far right fights with police, they're splitting their own group. There are people on the right who are split between supporting Nazis and supporting the police. And that dissonance, that fracture, that split causes them to fight with each other while we look great. All we have to do is kick our feet up, you know, lean back on our deck chair with a big margarita and go like, haha, look at these like cops fighting cops. Look at these fash fighting fash. Haha, we get to make jokes, you know, pig on pig violence. Woohoo! Like, wow, one guy has his hood on, one guy has it at home. Woohoo! We get to make all those jokes. And meanwhile, the right is fighting with itself. Remember after January 6th when there was a really big schism where the right had to decide whether or not they were pro-cop when the Capitol Police defended the Capitol building against the January 6th protesters? That schism actually led to a lot of people fracturing off the right. Not so many people that Trump is no longer like a viable electoral threat, but enough people that it, caused fracturing within their ranks. Having them clash with police forces a lot of people on the right to really reevaluate their beliefs because they have to decide whether or not they're actually in favor of the police or whether or not they're, uh, in favor of something else that occasionally conflicts with the law. And I know that seems like it'd be easy for somebody who might otherwise be sympathetic to Nazis to resolve, but you have to understand something really important, which is that most conservatives are retarded. Okay, sorry. Look, I'm sorry, guys. I've looked at this so many times because I've talked about Antifa a bunch, and I remember all the protests outside of Berkeley. This is my opinion on the matter. It is not the same as downplaying the threat Nazis pose, not even remotely. I think it's a very sensible, evidence-based, well-thought-out approach towards the thing. But, how does this tactic work in a situation like Palestinians are in against Israeli fascists? Totally different. So don't even. Complicated. Don't even. I'm specifically talking in Western countries when you have LARPy ultra far right protests that march around in public that aren't starting conflicts with people and they don't have a specific counter protest to go. Very specific, very specific. Okay, yeah, okay, just yeah. Gotta be careful. My worry is that it gives police an opportunity to look effective and necessary. I am completely okay with police looking effective and necessary if they are doing so while truncheoning some dipshit with a swastika flag. I will, very much like I will render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. I will give credit where it is due, and I will support the police in the capacity of them crunching down on a Nazi protest group. Okay, sorry, that was a lot of talking that I did without breathing. I'm trying to get oxygen back to my brain. Yeah, okay.
An obligation to protect First Amendment rights. The Midwest chapter of the Anti-Defamation League urged communities to do more to stop anti-Semitism, saying in a statement, "Now is the time to speak out against anti-Semitism, extremism, and hate, and take the necessary actions to ensure Jews feel and are safe."
Nice beam. Okay. I didn't expect to talk that much in that subject for that one. Hey, Vosh, what about Malcolm X when he talked about fighting back? I hate you for asking that. It's complicated. Fighting back in what capacity? You are fighting back when you intelligently engage with the behavior of your opposition and do things that increase the likelihood of them looking bad at the. It's so complicated. It's so complicated. People will often say that the civil rights movement would not have been as effective without the more militant wing of Malcolm X and the Black Panther Party and such, and that's true. But it's also worth pointing out that the Black Panther Party would not have been nearly as effective without the civil rights movement. Like, they both work in tandem. There's a lot of complicated shit that and there's a lot of shit, like lessons that we can learn about mistakes that previous historical figures have made. Malcolm X made plenty of mistakes. Very much a guy who made in a making mistakes competition, Malcolm X beats MLK out easily. Dude made a lot of mistakes. It got him killed. It's complicated. Just please remember that when I started this channel, it was like the loudest era of like Berkeley street fighting, where Milo Yiannopoulos would go to a college campus for the specific intention of riling up a bunch of opposition, and all that ever did was made stuff harder for us. I need to remind all you guys, whatever you may remember from that era, all of those like Antifa versus counter protesters versus counter protesters, people fighting in the streets, responding to trying to like protest the university, blah, blah, blah. Every single time that was bad for us because the right had a dedicated, coordinated media apparatus, outlet, and the tools and the skills necessary to propagandize the fuck out of it because that was their primary tactic, whereas the opposition were literally unorganized college students, meaning that even if they acted really well, which they didn't have the ability to capitalize on any of the engagements because, again, fascists live for starting conflicts and then whining about the outcomes of the conflicts they start. That is like their main thing, going all the way back to the beginning of fascism. They love that shit. They love that shit. Leftists aren't, and we don't have a predisposition for that, which means that our content creators and the people in media who are sympathetic to us don't do that same thing. They don't engage in that kind of behavior. And in retrospect, if you take a look at like how popular those rabble rousers got back then, Andy No, Milo Yiannopoulos, versus, have you guys seen what it looks like when a person on the right does like a media speaking tour or whatever and just nobody gives a shit? It's been leaning more and more towards that, and I love it. Ben Shapiro will still occasionally do his college tours or whatever, and like, okay, great, but I don't see that much of a fuss about it. And I don't interpret that as like society normalizing it, because people are still very negatively polarized against these groups. What I interpret it as is like, just let them be, because what they're looking for is conflict. Ben Shapiro does not show up to a college campus to speak to a group of a few hundred students. He shows up there so that well-intentioned but ultimately rhetorically ineffective left-leaning college students will ask him questions or challenge him and lose, because he has a bunch of pre-recorded answers listed off, which is why I celebrate people like Alec Gunter who go there prepared with rhetoric. Like, Ben Shapiro is not going to use his encounter with Alec Gunter or Shark Zero as like, here's a clip of me epically owning anybody, because they show up knowing the game. But unless you know the game, like Shark or Alec Gunter do, and Demi Gloom as well, who we saw her thing recently, she did well, I say. If you know the game the way they do, instantly their bit falls apart. But most college students don't know the game, and as a consequence of that, they go up there and they get made a fool of by Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh or whatever else. And those are the clips that they use. That's why they're doing it. So what happens if Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro shows up at a college campus, does their little bit for an hour and a half, and then no left-leaning person challenges them? The only questions they get are from other conservatives going, I love you, sir. What happens if that happens? Like, what is the outcome of that? Okay, I was actually asking. Circle jerking. It's just circle jerking. It's boring. Nothing happens. No videos to make, no content, nothing to galvanize people over, nothing to like form a culture war or talking point over, or nothing to go viral. It's a waste of time. They flew out there, prepared, did their bit, left, hotel room, fly back the next morning or whatever, for nothing. Waste of time. Waste of money, waste of time. They do get paid. They can get paid. I don't care if they get paid. What I care about is how effectively is this being used as a leverage in the broader political battle. And in those cases, it just doesn't. I think that in most cases, it is smart to avoid conflict. I think that when far-right groups are being rabble-rousers on the street, it's usually best to mock them from a distance or not at all. Take videos and act like ordinary people. Don't take videos of them and going, well, as Lenin wrote, the exacerbation of the material conflict between the proletariat and bourgeois has resulted in... Don't do that, okay? Like, just take videos. You're just a regular citizen who's freaking out. Because remember, the whole point is Nazis shouldn't just be repugnant to commies. Nazis should be repugnant to everyone. The kinds of people who show up to counter-protest or even act upset at Nazi groups shouldn't be commies. That's what they want. Nazis want to pose themselves as the scourging fire that cleanses society of communists and degenerates. That's their narrative. They show up and they're they burn them out. That's what they want you to think they are. In reality, they're rats. And they should be treated as such. People, normal people, should just be freaked out by them. So be freaked out by them. If they're going to fight people, because they want to fight, they're gunning for a fight, they're lunatics. They're in a Nazi gang. Of course they're lunatics, If they're going to fight someone, don't have them fight Antifa. Why make it this back and forth thing where it's like, oh, two extremist groups fighting each other? That's what the average person thinks. Don't engage with that. Have them fight cops. Let them rabble rouse. Seriously, we're not in a point in this country where cops will show up to protect Nazis that are vandalizing or attacking people. I know when there are protesters and counter-protesters, the police tend to side with the right. I know. Trust me. I've covered it a million times. I'm not denying that. But that does not mean that cops just flat out have a no arresting Nazis policy. And if you do think that, if you really do think that cops just flat out will not engage with law, with far-right protesters, you need to get offline for a bit. I'm very sorry. You need to get you need to like engage a little bit with reality. Um, so in or yeah, if the cops show up and don't do anything, film that. Sure, film that too. If a Nazi dude runs up and attacks you for no reason, you can defend yourself. But I also want to keep in mind, like, let's operate within reasonable degrees of LARP. Okay. When people talk about like defending yourself from Nazi militias, the number of times that groups like this have just gone downtown and started punching people, how often has that happened? Come on. Let's not pretend we're in like the last days of the Weimar Republic here, all right? We're not in a position where like judges, the entire court system, lawyers, university professors, and a bunch of regular people are like quietly shifting their feet waiting for this to break out. We're not in that position. Calm it down a bit. For the most part, groups like this just do a little LARP march and then go back home. Overwhelmingly, that's the outcome. And overwhelmingly, when they do get rowdy, cops may have preferentiality towards them, but cops still respond to what they do. And when you get those beautiful, rare moments where the cops do fight with them, it looks so good for us. It looks so fucking good for us. I love it. But usually that doesn't even happen. So just chill out, videotape whatever they do. If they look bad, that's great. You want to get that on video, obviously. Just don't go up to them and start confronting them. Not only is it bad politically, it's bad for your safety. Like, don't do that. A lot of people want to be like the Antifa warrior in the street, but time and time again, the effectiveness of that role, of that archetype has been challenged, and I just don't think it holds up under scrutiny. Vosh, some impressionable young people don't know that fascism is bad and these people look bad. No. No. Okay? There are no young people who are going to look at this and think, this seems normal, and then will be positively inclined towards us if you go and confront them. I promise you, to the politically unengaged mind, to the normie brain, this looks really bad on its own. Only a tiny minority of Americans would think this doesn't look bad, and those are people already in agreement with them. In terms of making the situation at hand look good to normies, it's not a matter of convincing them that this is bad. It's a matter of letting them stay convinced of that without any qualifiers. Does that make sense? So this is bad, but don't let them go thinking, oh, but Antifa street gangs are also bad. Don't let them go thinking, oh, but they were cracked down on by police for no reason, for First Amendment reasons or whatever. Just let them look at this and have everyone point and laugh. And I swear to God, you'll get better outcomes on average. The situation is really, really complicated, okay? But getting normies on your side is always what this is about. That's why shit like this always gets denounced by the far right, because this doesn't get normies on their side. It's actually really ineffective for getting normies on their side. Trust me, normies are not like waking up one day thinking, man, the economy sure was good under the Clinton administration, but coffees are expensive these days, gosh darn it. And then they see like 30 dudes in LARP gear with swastikas and think, I think I'll try this out. Like that, it's very, very bad for them, An appeal towards normalcy, even in this era of populism, is still mostly the most effective way of galvanizing people towards our side. And in the times where there have been mobilized counter-protests, which I think have to be done reasonably and responsibly and in very specific situations, because, again, having guys walk around unchallenged like this rarely work out in their favor. Remember the Nazis who showed up in Australia for the Posey Parker thing? The Nazis who, Sieg Heiled at her turf thing? They didn't, nobody ran up and punched them, but they still ended up being so optically odious that Australia passed laws against them. Remember? The presence of those Nazis at the Posey Parker rally were so bad for her and for her movement that she is now forever associated with Nazis. Nobody had to run up and punch them to make people think it was bad for them to do this. If you're a TERF and a bunch of people who look like this show up at your rally, you don't need Antifa running up to beat them. The association has been made. These guys and TERFs, hand in hand, arms together, that's all you need. And this was so bad for them. Massive optical loss for them. Massive optical loss. Huge L for Posey Parker in terms of optics. It led to laws getting passed. This is what I mean, People like this want you to go up and fight them. They want you. They're so ready for it. They, when they're doing their little Nazi LARP camp training bits, okay, are training each other on how to best uh, take advantage of street conflict. You know, they are all teaching each other. Like, if somebody comes up to you, here's the language you use. If, you know, bait them into throwing the first punch. They love to bait people into throwing the first punch, you know. Take video of it. Like, show our peaceful protest was attacked by Antifa, so on and so forth. Does everyone get what I'm saying? I'm sorry. I know I'm sounding like very, very imperative here, but dude, I lived through enough of the Berkeley years of the only way to fight back against the far right is to counter protest, and it doesn't matter how we counter protest. We have no idea how to counter protest. We have no leaders. I lived through that. I am done with that. Being smarter than them is not a sign of weakness. Okay. Ugh. All right. Okay. I do think it's very important. Yeah, exactly. It's like the thing they think about most, Alec Gunter. It's like the main thing they want. In Sacramento, there was a clash where they tried attacking people with bats and knives as the counter protesters only brought anti-Nazi literature, made them look pretty bad. Oh, I don't even remember that. Yeah, for sure. That'll do it. Yes, DM. I'm not saying there are absolutely no cases where you should ever engage in defensive violence against people like this, but I think those situations are far less common than ones where a more strategic and effective response can be taken. Okay, sorry about all that. I know that took a while. I've gotten a lot of hate for my takes on this, but I swear to God, this is coming from the deepest place of like respect and sympathy for the concept of fash bashing, okay? This is absolutely not like a I think it's mean to do this thing. Like at the end of the day, protesting and counter protesting are all about power. And in this country right now, power is mostly about do the normies sympathize with you? Because the normies vastly outnumber the far right or the far left. So you really want that. That is power. You really want that power. If you lose that power, you lose. Frankly, you just lose.